everyone, it's Allison. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we are going to be looking at why circle dies are some of the most useful tools that you can have. And we're going to be looking at the Simon Says Stamp Sunny Vibes release. This is the June 2024 release. And I have two cards to share with you today. And while they look quite different, they do both utilize circle dies to achieve an interesting effect. So let's look at this first card. And how fun is this little plane zooming around the earth? This was a lot of fun to make. So let's look at the products that we'll be using for this card. This is the new Around the World stamp set. And I did use the outline of the plane. There's actually a solid plane as well. And I'm going to use a couple sentiments. But this stamp set is really fun. It has lots of cute little elements like hot air balloons and paper airplanes. This is the Earth die. And you'll see that the die does correspond to the stamp in the stamp set. It's the same size, same layout. And that stamp set does have a matching die set. I don't happen to have that yet. All right, the circle dies that I'm going to be using are the Circle Infinity dies from Hero Arts. And you'll see I have a card panel. It's square. I believe it's 5.5 inches square. And I used a large circle to cut out the hole in the middle. Now the smaller size is going to hold that earth die that I just showed you. And I chose this smaller size because the distance between the two circles is going to be the perfect distance for this little slider element. This is from My Favorite Things, and it's just this little piece of plastic. It looks almost exactly like a Tic Tac. And it's hard to tell with the dies, but the spacing between these two circles is going to keep that slider die in place. So here's the circle, that smaller circle that I cut, and you'll see this is the negative space of that earth die, and you'll see that my circle's a little bit bigger than this earth die, but that's okay. So I am just quickly ink blending my water onto this earth using Tumble Glass and Salty Ocean Distress inks. And I'm not going for a perfect blend here. It's water, right? So just quickly getting some color on there. And now I'm going to color all of my continents, and I'm going to use two colors for each. So this first one is Twisted Citron, and I'm using Rustic Wilderness to get some deeper shading. And for this one, I'm using Dried Marigold, and the darker color is Spiced Marmalade. And I'm using my little Rainbow Splash ink blending brushes, which are great. Now for this little guy, I'm just coming in with whatever yellow ink was already on my brush, and then I'll add shading with Fossilized Amber. So it wasn't worth pulling out a light yellow color when I already had yellow on my brush. So here I decided to darken that orange up a bit with some carved pumpkin just to make it stand out from that yellow a little bit. And for the pink or the red, I'm again using what was already on the brush for the light color. And I'm going to come in with Abandoned Coral. And honestly, I can't remember the last time I used this color. It's like at the back of my drawer, and I always forget about it. Now this little guy, I came in hot and heavy with the prize ribbon. I'm not sure what I was thinking, but it worked out. And finally for the purple, I used Wilted Violet and Villainous Potion. So I did make these continents 2 layers thick. And for the back layer, I had just quickly blended that same light blue color that I used for the water so that you wouldn't see white on the edges. And all right, now remember how my earth die is a little bit smaller than this circle die. So I'm just going to use this negative space to ballpark where everything goes. It doesn't have to be perfect. And, you know, obviously what matters most is that the edges of the continents meet up with the edges of the circle. So again, I'm just ballparking where these things go. And, you know, nobody's going to know in the end. So I'm just going to go around the globe and glue all of these on there. I think this die is really fun. I think there's so many different ways to use this die, especially with that in conjunction with that stamp set. I have actually a lot of cute ideas for this set. All right, for these tiny islands, I'm just using the holes in the negative piece to attach those in the proper place. That was just the easiest thing I could think of. And here is the finished earth. So now I'm just double checking that the spacing is sufficient for this little slider element. And you'll see me come back in quite often and make sure that everything's working. All right, now I have a black card base that is 5 3/4 inch square. And now I have a second white panel. It's slightly smaller than the one with the circle. And I'm just going to glue that panel to the card base. I just needed something in the back of that circle that was white, so that's why I'm doing this. And I'm just, you know, eyeballing the center of the card base. Now I have put foam tape on the back of my panel, but I left space around the circle so that my slider element will have room to move. And I did the same on the earth, leaving room around the outer edge. And again, I'm gonna give it a little test. Now I have cut a little piece of paper that is going to hold this slider element. It's kind of oval, but I did just fussy cut it. It's not perfect. It doesn't need to be. And I'm going to take some score tape. This is an 1/8 inch score tape, and I'm going to put that on each side of this slider element. And then I can remove the release tape on one side and I'll just stick it onto this little oval that I made. And that oval, it's just a piece of white cardstock. And by the way, you could easily just use a piece of thick foam tape if you don't have something like this little slider element. All right, now I have this red piece of paper in back of my card base so that I can see that black margin when I'm lining up this card panel. I usually eyeball when I add things to my card panel, so it's just hard when you have a black card base on the black craft mat. All right, so I've already attached that outer part, and so I'm putting my slider element in there before I add the globe. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to add it. And once I add the globe or the earth, my slider element will stay in there. Now, I had totally forgotten that I had wanted to stamp some sentiments onto this panel. And I'm using this carrier sheet from one of my waffle flower grip mats. And that way I can stamp things on there and kind of practice. Now, I want to stamp along a curve, and I'm going to show you the easiest way that I have found to do that. Now, I'm showing you all these different ways that you can try, but your stamp won't stay in a curved shape if you're trying to do it on top of your cardstock. It just doesn't have anything to cling to, right? So you can grab it with your Misty Door and try to, you know, put it in a curve, but that's just going to waste a lot of time and effort. So the easiest way that I have found is to use the actual die that you're trying to match the curve to. So again, the stamp is on the Misty Door, so it has something to cling to. And now I can just curve it around this die. And then once I have the curve, I can just move the actual card until I get the right placement. Okay, and remember, I still have this little carrier sheet, basically this clear piece of acetate over my card panel. And I can stamp on that and not worry about ruining my card. And now again, I can just adjust the card itself. You know, if that first position wasn't good, I can just move the card instead of moving the stamp. And now that I know it's in the right place, I can stamp on the actual panel. So I'm going to do this again a little bit faster for you. I'm just going to grab that stamp with my Misty Door. I'm going to use that circle die to get the right curve in the stamp. I'm going to make sure my carrier sheet is over my card panel. And I'm going to stamp, and I'm not worried if it's not in the right place because I just have to move the card now. And I'm just going to practice one more time. And now that I know it's in the right place, I can remove the carrier sheet and go ahead and stamp. And I think stamping sentiments in a curve when you have a circle element is really, I don't know, it's just kind of a nice finishing touch. Now I can remove that release tape from the top of my little slider element and attach my little plane. And by the way, I just colored my plane with Copic markers. And so here's the moment of truth. And how fun is this? I love it. All right, now I did add some clouds and the little airmail sentiment from that stamp set. And I'm really happy with this card. It's really fun. All right, let's take a look at this card really quick. And I'm going to show you. Now you just have a wreath with a sentiment in the middle, but the sentiment is actually stamped on the inside of the card, which I think is, you know, just, it's really easy, but it's just a unique little twist. So this is the Gentle Layers Floral Wreath, again from the new release, and this one die cuts out the basic wreath shape and then all of the flower components that go on it. So it's just one die. You cut it from white cardstock and you can just color everything. This is the Sunshine and Smiles stamp set, and I love these sentiments. And here we go. So here's the wreath and all those little elements that I'll color with ink and my blending brushes. And I have a top folding A2 card base. It's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And then I have a white panel that measures 4 by 5 1/4, just to leave a little bit of margin. And I'm going to figure out where I want the wreath on my panel. And then I will take a circle die that is roughly the size of the center of the wreath. Again, it's from my Hero Arts Infinity circle die set. And I'll just figure out, you know, where I want that hole. And once I have figured it out, I can just run that through my die cutting machine. So now I have this panel with the hole cut out, and I'm putting it onto my card base. I'm taking the circle that came out of that hole, and I'm putting it on the card base and then putting the die around it. So I'm basically getting the exact position of the hole on my card base as it was on that panel. And I'm just taping this all in place. I'll open up the card base and run that through my die cutting machine. So here we go. Let's make sure that everything lines up. And it does. All right, so now I have another panel, same size, 4 inches by 5 1/4, and I'm gluing that on the inside of the card base. And now I am putting the whole thing into my Misty because we need to stamp. So I'm just taking this wreath, again, this is just the basic wreath shape, and I have this stamp set, and I'm just trying to figure out which sentiment I want to go with. And I will decide on that Hello Friend sentiment. So now I'm just trying to figure out the placement, trying to figure out what orientation I'm going to put this wreath in. And I thought about heat embossing this in gold or something like that, but sometimes I really just love a crisp black sentiment, and that was my black pigment ink. Now I can just glue on my top panel. And here's my wreath. I've colored all my flowers and the wreath with my distress inks and brushes. And assembling it is just really easy. And again, that one die cuts out all of the elements you need to make the wreath. And it was fun coloring these little elements. All right, I slipped a piece of paper in there because I was worried that I might get glue on the inside panel where I had stamped that sentiment. I did have to remove it so I could see what I was doing, and then I'll put it back in before I start pressing down. Again, I just was paranoid I was going to get glue where it shouldn't be. So here is the result. Now you do see the back of the flowers through that hole, but that's okay. And I did put a few gemstones on a few of the flowers, and I decided to add some little black dots here and there just to tie in that black sentiment. And also you can see that I added a little sub-sentiment, the "You're the best." That comes from a Simon Says Stamp sentiment strip set, of which I have a million of them, so I don't really know which set that's from. Sometimes I have little sentiments that I cut out for cards and then I don't end up using them, and I put them in this little container. And this was one of those ones that was just hanging out, and it seemed like the perfect little sub-sentiment. All right, so this video showed just a few fun things that you can do with circle dies. Again, I think circle dies are one of the most important things that you can have in your stash. And I have the Hero Arts nesting circles, but just about every company has their own set of nesting circle dies. So if you don't already have one, get your hands on one, because I use circles all the time. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Leave a comment. Let me know which card you liked the best. And if you did like this video, please give me a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. I appreciate you being here, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.